Tasmat, why? Na, our, Veda, he knows, na, not, asishaha, desires. Translation and purport given by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. When the Lord, out of His natural compassion, thinks of His devotee, by that process only are all desires of the neophyte devotee fulfilled. The Lord is situated in every living entity's heart, although the living entity may be very insignificant. The Lord knows everything about the living entity, including all his desires. Although we are very insignificant, why should the Lord not know our desires? Purport. A very advanced devotee does not think himself advanced. He is always very humble. The Supreme Personality of Godhead in his plenary expansion as the Paramatma or Supersoul sits in everyone's heart and can understand the attitudes and desires of his devotees. The Lord also gives opportunity to the non-devotees to fulfill their desires, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Mata Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha. Whatever a living entity desires, however insignificant he may be, is noted by the Lord, who gives him a chance to fulfill his desires. If the desires of the non-devotees are fulfilled, why not those of the devotee? A pure devotee simply wants to engage in the service of the Lord without material desires. And if he wants this within the core of his heart, where the Lord is situated, and if he is without ulterior motive, why should the Lord not understand? If a sincere devotee renders service to the Lord, or to the Archa Vigraha, the form of the Lord, all his activities prove successful because the Lord is present within his heart and understands his sincerity. Thus, if a devotee with all confidence goes on discharging the prescribed duties of devotional service, he will ultimately attain success. Om Akyana Timirandasya Jnananchala Shalakya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurve Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stabidam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamakyam Datati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uda Patakamalam Shri Urun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrajadam Sakana Raghunathan Vidam Tam Sajivam Satvedam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sakana Lalita Sri Visakan Vidamscha E Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Kopesha Kopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostude Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhano Sude Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpataruptyasya Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Yes, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Kadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Hare Krishna everyone, good morning. So we are here again at the part where the Prachetas are speaking to Krishna, and in this verse I think there are two very interesting points. One point is that Krishna knows all our desires because he is in our heart, but the other thing is, even though Krishna knows the desires of everyone, he still wants the devotees to actually pronounce the desires, to actually state the desires with their mouth, even though he knows already what the desires are. So this is a very interesting, throughout the Bhagavatam, whenever the Lord appears in front of any devotee, previously we had Prithu Maharaj, they start to glorify, but still Krishna asks them for, Krishna is ready to give them benedictions, and he knows what they actually want, still Krishna tells them, please, can you state yourself from your mouth our desires. In fact, as a jiva, the only thing we can do, if we study it very clearly, the only thing we can do as a jiva is to desire. Everything else is actually not in our hand. Krishna says that, or the Bhagavad Gita says, as a soul we desire, but actually all the things that really afterwards manifest or put into action are by the gunas, are by the prakriti, the mature nature. As a Paramatma, Krishna is sanctioning our desires, the prakriti is executing, and our role here is the only thing we can do is actually to desire. Krishna says about the 5 factors that require for an activity, which is so an activity can be executed. This is one factor, is the Lord himself, the Paramatma. But the other factors is our body, our senses, the endeavors, and then we as an individual, as a soul, the jiva. Without the other 4 factors, we cannot actually execute anything. All the other factors are required so that we can actually do some activities. Only thing we can do is desiring. We cannot even control our body, whatever happens in the cellular level. We cannot control the planets, we cannot control the earth. Only thing we can really do is, what is in our hand is to control our desires, or decide what desires we want to have at the end. And misplaced desires, this is the reason why we are here in this material world, why we are entangled by the Prakriti, why we are struggling. And the aim of the Krishna consciousness is to place the desires back to the place where it actually should belong. Our desires at the end should be in line with whatever Krishna desires or whatever the devotees desires. So that's the actual aim of our bhakti yoga, of our devotional practice, that we at the end can develop pure desires. What are the pure desires of a pure devotees? We see here already Prabhupada mentioning an advanced devotee is not thinking of himself very advanced. He is always humble, and all his desires are there, that he still humbly can serve further the Lord. And he always wants to be a servant of the Lord. He never wants to forget Krishna. He always wants to remember Krishna. He wants that all his material desires, which are an obstacle in his life, he wants them to be removed. And whatever is Krishna's satisfaction, that is the satisfaction of a pure devotee. So it's very interesting how the desires of a pure devotee, in what range, what quality they have. And even the prachetas, after a few verses, they start now to glorify the Lord. And now here's a part where Krishna asks, can you express your desires? What is your desires? Even though he already knows what the desires are. And what the prachetas are going to ask later is that they can always get the association of devotees so that they can always hear about Krishna. These are the sublime desires of pure devotees. Interestingly also, here in this verse they said Krishna also knows the desires of non-devotees, and Krishna knows the desires of neophytes. And clearly, as neophytes, our desires are a little different than what pure devotees desires. And I was just wondering, how do also pure devotees deal with kind of material desires which are usually not in line with devotional practice, which are somehow a hindrance? How do they cope with those desires? An interesting story is, of course, of Sudama. He was a pure devotee, he was a Brahmana, and he could live very simply in his hut. He didn't require many facilities or a big house, etc. He was just satisfied with the studies, with the Vedas, and with worshipping Krishna. And he had a very good family, a very nice wife. And the wife was a little bit worried that he was so simple that actually they didn't got enough Lakshmi to buy even food to feed the family. So she was a little bit worried, what will happen to my husband if he's going to live in this way? He's going to starve and die of starvation. We don't have enough to eat. So she asks him, my dear husband, I heard you have a friend. You always speak of a friend which you met in your Gurukul, and he's now a king of Dwaraka. So maybe why don't you go and see him and ask if he can help us? It's interesting. Usually devotees, they don't care about their bodies, but here his wife sees, but still they need some facilities and some resources that they can maintain their family. So she asks Sudama, why don't you go and meet Krishna? And Sudama, he's a little bit hesitant. I mean, how can I approach Krishna with this desire, with this wish? This is not appropriate. He's my supreme Lord. How can I go with some insignificant small desires? But then he sees, he sees here an opportunity that to see actually his friend again, to see Krishna, to meet him again, and to have an association again with him. So he thinks, this is a good opportunity to meet him, even though the aim or the motivation is something different. I get here to opportunity to meet my Lord again, my friend again. So his wife gives him some chipped rice, and he goes to Dwaraka, and there Krishna, already from the far, he sees his long friend, very old friend, has appeared again, returned, and Krishna gives him an exceptional reception. He invites him because Sudama is a Brahmana. Krishna even washes his feet. Krishna gives him nice new clothes, gives him something nice to eat, a very nice sitting place and a bed to rest. And now Sudama is thinking, wow, this is the way Krishna has accepted me, received me, and I just have come with two very insignificant things. I came with some little chipped rice, and I came with actually asking for a material desire, benefit. How shall I express this? How shall I do it? After a little conversation with Krishna, Krishna then asked, you have definitely brought some gifts to me. And Sudama, he's hesitant, how can Krishna give me such a feast? I have some rice, what shall I do? But Krishna, when he sees some love in the devotees, he just snaps it away. He just grabs it. So Krishna sees the rice, he grabs it and eats it and is completely satisfied with his devotee. So Sudama was a little hesitant to give the rice, but he was even more hesitant to express the real reason why he has come, to ask some material facility. And he cannot express that thought, and he leaves without even expressing this thought, this desire. And he goes back home and he thinks, actually I came to ask some money in the end, but doesn't matter. I have met my friend. This is the most important thing. So he goes home, but when he arrives home, he doesn't realize his place again. Just sees palaces, very nice rivers, very nice nature, many jewels and treasures, and he sees many servants, very nicely clothed, dressed, and then his wife comes, very nicely, beautifully decorated, as coming from the heavenly planets, and she pays obeisances, and he doesn't understand really, who am I landed? Is this my place? Then he starts to realize, oh no, Krishna, he is in my heart anyways, so he knows the real reason why I have approached him, and he has granted me so much wealth now. Whatever we have read in this verse, Krishna already knew the desires or what are in our heart, hidden in our heart. And Sudama, so even without expressing, Krishna gave him all the opulences. because he knows the desires in the heart. We see it many other places also. For example, when Dhruva Maharaj meets Krishna, first he has this impure desire. He wants to have a kingdom greater than his great-great-grandfather. And then when he sees Krishna, he says, similar thing happens. I cannot express my small desire now to Krishna. But Krishna still, he knows the real reason why we have approached Krishna, why the first reason we have approached Krishna, and Krishna gives him the Dhruva Loka. And it's of course, these are pure devotees. They have purified their desires, and still Krishna fulfilled all these kind of insignificant desires. But in our case, it's probably a little different. Our desires, especially our material desires, we are not yet ready to give them up. So it's still in our heart, and we have sometimes problems. What shall I do? Shall I just neglect them? The desires which are maybe not in line with pure devotional service. But if I neglect them, they will still stay in my heart somewhere, and one time or another they will come up again. If I don't develop a higher taste for Krishna, these desires are going to reappear. Or shall I fulfill them by my own endeavor? Shall I try myself and go out and work hard and to try to fulfill my desires? But then we know it depends also on our past karma, if I am destined to these desires to be fulfilled. Or I can go to the demigods. This is also an option to fulfill my desires. But there we have to know also that I have to do some sacrifices, to put some yagyas, worships the demigods, to them fulfill my desires. Or the last, but probably the best option, is to go with these desires to Krishna himself. Why not approach Krishna and tell Krishna, Krishna, I have some desires. These are not very sublime desires, but still I have them. So I give them in your care. So please deal with them and give me the best option. The Bhagavatam actually says that akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udarati tivrena bhakti yogena jayate purusham param. The Bhagavatam actually says, if you have no desires, or if you have all the desires that could possibly exist in this material world, if you have desires like liberation or cities or whatever desires you can think of, still the best thing is to go and worship Krishna, to perform devotional service, even if you have all the material desires that could possibly exist. And this is very interesting. Why? Because when we go back to Krishna and tell our situation that we are conditioned, Krishna is very carefully dealing with his devotees and dealing with his desires. There is a difference how demigods fulfill desires and how Krishna fulfills desires. How do usually demigods fulfill the desires of the worshippers? They just, when the worshipper has performed all the sacrifices, yagyas, the demigods, they just grant the blessings without actually looking for all the consequences that these desires or these benedictions can have on this worshipper. We saw many times Brahma giving desires to even demons, fulfilling their desires, and then afterwards getting stuck in troubles at the end. Right? But Krishna, he deals very differently. When we approach him with our desires, Krishna does not immediately just grant our desires. He is very carefully studying our situation and looking what is the best what best situation can I arrange for this person so that he can come back to me. In the Bhagavatam, where there is a section of the Jambudvip. There is even a glorification of Bharatvarsha and the devotees there. And this verse is very interesting, where Krishna speaks how he fulfills material desires of devotees. He says that he does not bestow benedictions upon the devotee that will cause him to demand more benedictions again. So when we go to Krishna with our desires, he fulfills our desires in that way that we will not again start to ask for more and more. When he fulfills our desires, he gives some lessons for us to learn, lessons that help us to purify our desires. He says that he will purify, or he will give us benedictions in that way that we will ultimately come and surrender at his lotus feet. This is the way he satisfies our desires. He is very scrutinizingly, very carefully studying what is the best for us, and treats us in this way. So because he is in the heart, he knows what we want, but more importantly, he also knows what we really truly need, which we don't, most of the time we don't know. So he's dealing in that way. There is even a very interesting question asked by Parikshit Maharaj. He asks Sukadeva Goswami, Krishna, he is the husband of goddess of fortune. So he's very rich naturally. But Lord Shiva, he is a renunciate. He lives like a renunciate. He's very poor. But the contradiction is that the devotees of Krishna, Krishna being very rich, but the devotees are very poor of Krishna. The devotees of Krishna are very poor. And Lord Shiva, who is living very simply, but the devotees of Lord Shiva seem to be very rich. How can this happen? Do someone remembers what answer then Krishna gives? Huh? Krishna, or the Sukadeva Goswami later then tells the story of Vrikasura. He explains that the demigods, they are very easily angered, but also very easily pleased. So when someone worships the demigods, they easily grant you desires, but not looking very what the consequences might be. Lord Shiva, they give the example of Vrikasura, who performed many austerities and sacrifices. Lord Shiva was pleased, and then Vrikasura asks the boom that on whomever's head he places his hand, the head should explode. That is the desire that Vrikasura is asking, and Lord Shiva just grants it. And then Vrikasura himself wants to try it out, so he says, Lord Shiva, I want to try it out on your head first, see if your head explodes. And Lord Shiva sees, no, now I am in trouble, wanders around, asks for help, and comes at the end to Krishna. And then Krishna plays the trick and says to Vrikasura, why don't you try it out on your head first? And then Vrikasura tries it out on his head, and then he's destroyed. But here we see how easily demigods grant desires, but Krishna is not dealing with in this way. In that same chapter, then Krishna explains to Yudhishthir, where Krishna says that he says, when I feel special compassion for someone, I gradually deprive him of his wealth. Then the poverty-stricken man's children, wife, and other relations all abandon him. This is very interesting. When Krishna gives special mercy, what will happen is the wealth of all the wealth of the devotee all vanishes, and everyone starts to abandon him. And Krishna says, and at that point, the devotee tries more and harder to fulfill his desires, but then he gets frustrated. And at that time, my devotee is ready to completely surrender unto me. And this is the special mercy which I give to my devotees. This is the way Krishna grants the desires. Probably at the beginning we thought, now I have come to Krishna, he will just give me everything what I wish. But we didn't know this secret probably at that time. Krishna is first, he's purifying us. He's dealing with us very carefully if we are not ready for our desires. There is even Tondararipuri Alvar, a big Acharya saint from the south. He sings a very nice verse. He sings, Urilen Kani illai, Uravu mattoruvar illai, Parilin Padam Mulam, Pattilen Parama Murti. He's lamenting, this great Acharya, he's lamenting that, he's saying that he has no land or no property or no town to call that this is mine. He's lamenting that he has no rights to claim to be his. And he's lamenting that he has no relatives and friends to be called that they belong to him. He has no land, no rights, and no friends and relatives. But he laments further and says, but I also don't have the wish to grasp your lotus feet finally and to surrender unto you. This is a very nice verse singing by this Alvar, and it's very in line what Krishna has told here previously. And this Alvar is explaining, we are just lamenting similarly in this world. We say, I don't have wealth, I don't have property, I don't have family, friends, etc. Because they all start to disappear from us. But then he says, but you should actually be worried about something else. Your real desire should be, or your real concern should be, that you might not get a place in the holy Dham. Instead of thinking, I don't have a land or property, you should be thinking, maybe you will not get a place in the holy Dham to live with the Lord. You should be more concerned with this. You are claiming that you have no rights in this world, but you have a right to perform devotional service, and you have forgotten this. Why don't you care about this right of yours? This is your true right, which belongs to you. No one can take away. Why do you lament about all the other rights which you had with this body? And you lament that you don't have any friends and relatives, but you should be concerned with, or you should actually search for the true relatives and true friends. And who are they? They are the devotees of Krishna. So you should be concerned that you might not get sadhu sangha in the future. So you should be concerned with this and search out for the Vaishnavas. It's a very nice prayer by this Alvar, and says how actually we have these insignificant desires, but how we should actually at the end transform it to have them in line with Krishna's desires. I have also found another verse where Prahlad Maharaj is explaining something also very interesting. Nrsimhadev, at the end, Prahlad Maharaj pacifies Lord Nrsimhadev, and the Nrsimhadev asks for any benediction that he can give to Prahlad. And Prahlad gives something very interesting. He speaks about an unqualified servant and the qualities of an unqualified master. And he says an unqualified servant is someone who desires material profits from his master. And I don't want to become an unqualified servant and want to ask profit from you, my Lord. And at the same time, he also states what are the qualities of an unqualified master. An unqualified master is someone who just freely fulfills all the desires of his servants just to maintain a prestigious position. An unqualified master is someone who just fulfills all the desires of his servant So only that he can be known to be a good master. So the other people can know, oh, this is a very nice master, he fulfills all the desires of his servant, so let's go to him. And if a master thinks in that way, he's an unqualified master. Because a master should always think if that desire is fitting or will benefit my servant. And Prahlad Maharaj says, Nrsimhadev, you are a qualified master. Therefore, I don't want to become an unqualified servant and ask for benedictions. Krishna very carefully always deals with the desires of his devotees. He does not grant freely all the desires of those who approach him. If he would do this, all the people in this world would just come to Krishna, right? Everyone knows, oh, Krishna fulfills all the desires, let's go to him. But Krishna is not ready to just fulfill all the desires that can be harmful for his worshippers. Therefore, Krishna doesn't care if others know him to be the master who fulfills all the desires. He's just ready to very carefully bring his worshippers and devotees back to him. And previously we discussed the story of Sudama, and we explained how Sudama at the end got all the wealth, and Sudama then gives a prayer to Krishna and says, Krishna, I know you have given me so many things, but I also know that other devotees also had gotten so many opulences, but they have fallen down due to the so many extravagant opulences. And I don't want to fall down because of this wealth. So please always protect me that I don't get entrapped with now seeing all this wealth. I don't want to develop again my material desires. It's like the Sudama explains, like a mature, a well-wishing father does not immediately grant the desires of his child. The father very carefully sees if the child is ready, and when the child is ready, grown up, an adult who knows what his responsibilities are, then the father gives him the wealth. So similarly, when we are ready for something, then Krishna is fulfilling. So yeah, these were some thoughts on usually desires which we are ashamed of, or we think we are conditioned, why I have these desires. But the best thing is to go with these desires to Krishna, because Krishna knows how to best deal with them. But I also thought sometimes we are acting a little bit in the opposite. Maybe I was wondering, asking a question to you. Did you have a particular desire, let it be a material or a spiritual desire? You ask them to Krishna, but then you know, oh, Krishna is a naughty boy. He plays tricks. So Krishna, I just want to clarify. My real desire is this. The next day you come to Krishna and says, Krishna, I want to clarify my desires. I exactly want this. I know you play some tricks, but this is what I exactly want. This is what I'm exactly wishing. I don't know if you ever approach Krishna in this way. Usually, like a devotee has, maybe he wishes for a job and says, oh Krishna, I have found a job description. I think this is the best thing that can happen to me, so please fulfill this. And then we see Krishna is not fulfilling that desire, and then we are wondering, Krishna, I told you this is the best option for me. Why are you not acting in this way? Or we think we are looking for a husband or a wife, and we see a very nice man and think, or a very nice woman and think, she is very qualified to become my wife. So Krishna, she's the partner, fulfill my desires. And then she marries someone else, and then think, Krishna, I just expressed my desires. What are you doing? Something wrong or something? So I remember when I was smaller, I was very bad in essays, writing essays at school, and I would ask Krishna, please Krishna, give me a sufficient grade, but I would always get insufficient grades in my essays, and I think, Krishna, I told you this is my wish. Why don't you fulfill them? Huh? And this is very interesting. Just came to my mind, because sometimes we go to Krishna and deal with him as if he's our order supplier. As if he's a demigod who just fulfills all our desires. We go to him and ask him and deal with him as if he's our order supplier, and are worried that sometimes Krishna does not understand our wish and he might play tricks. Like Kumbhakarna, he wanted to defeat the demigods, so he's doing sacrifices and austerities, and Brahma appears in front of him. And Kumbhakarna is ready to ask to get rid of to destroy all the demigods and to get the throne of Indra. This was the desire which Kumbhakarna had. But then the demigods were all afraid, and Saraswati enters the tongue of Kumbhakarna and switches the boon or the words Kumbhakarna is asking. Instead of asking for Indra's throne, Kumbhakarna at the end asked for Nitra. Instead of Indra, he is asking for Nitra, sleep. And then Brahma just grants him the wish that he may be always sleeping. So this is why Kumbhakarna, for 6 months he's sleeping, for 1 day he's waking up, and again for 6 months he's sleeping. And sometimes we think like this, Krishna can play tricks, and then can change my desires, like he did for Kumbhakarna, so I should be careful. Krishna, this is my desires. But this is just absurd, because when we look at today's verse, what do we read? Krishna already knows what is in the core of our heart. He knows the best what is in our core of our heart. So we should not be worried that Krishna doesn't know exactly what we want, but we should just surrender whatever we have in his shelter. Just going to finish and then it's okay. So yeah, just concluding, these were some of my thoughts. So Krishna knows all our desires, and even desires that even worshippers of demigods, those desires, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, are actually indirectly fulfilled by him. But the best thing is that we put our desires back in the right position, in line of devotional service, in line with Krishna and our spiritual masters. And if you do this, then even the demigods are ready to help us to gain back our devotional activity, like Lord Shiva here. He was the reason why the Prachetas are now on the devotional track, because he saw their purity. So even Lord Shiva was ready now to give them or bring them back to the right track. And Krishna is particularly requesting to Prachetas to pronounce their desires, even though he already knows this. And this is for us to learn from these great devotees what are the pure desires a devotee should have. And with every day, all the prayers which we sing, with all the songs which we sing, we should then understand how the pure devotees are praying to Krishna. And with every day chanting all these prayers and reading the prayers by the Prachetas and the other devotees, we should get to know what really pure spiritual desires are, and then develop also them. So thank you very much for listening. These were some of my thoughts. And you wanted to say something?
Thank you, wonderful class. You said that Krishna already knows what's in our heart. And then he also said that he wants to hear what we want. He wants to hear from us. I'm not sure if you meant spiritual desires only, or also he wants to hear us verbalize our material desires. That's one. And then also why Krishna carries what we lack. He preserves what we have. Why did it even come so far that Sudama, was in such a situation that, his wife had to ask him, come on, this is not going to work like this.
So first question, so here in the Bhagavatam, Krishna regularly asks the devotees to pronounce their desires, verbalize them. I think this is especially for us to know, understand the thoughts and the insight of a pure devotee, so that we, the readers of the Bhagavatam, get to know what are the pure desires, or what are the pure desires that we should develop. And when I think verbalizing our material desires, I think there is no harm in that. I mean, we should know, or Rupa Goswami says, why we are doing sadhaka bhakti, because we are not ready. We know what is the best, we know the pure devotional service is the best, but still we have some desire for sense gratification, which is why we perform sadhana bhakti and all the with rules and regulation we are performing them. So we should understand that we are conditioned and we have material desires, and then we should, I think, just to tell Krishna, look, these are my deficiencies, so please help me to deal with them. So I think in this way we can even verbalize our material desires and say, Krishna, these are my deficiencies, please help me to deal with them the best so that I can purify my desires and come back. So I would say this. And the second question, why did Krishna put the Sudama in that condition? There is no difference for Sudama being in that poor condition or being in that rich condition. I think even in these verses, some verses before, Krishna grants Prachetas. Krishna tells Prachetas, I give you the benediction. For many years you can enjoy in this material world. Why should Krishna give these benedictions to the Prachetas? Because Krishna knows for them it doesn't matter if they are surrounded by material wealth or not, because they are always fixed in Krishna's service. They will never be entangled with material circumstances. So for Sudama there was no difference before and after.
I heard a story from the devotee in Mayapur, and he told...
Maybe you want to use the mic, if you want to tell a story that everyone gets to.
I heard a story in Mayapur from a devotee who went to Krishna with a desire. And he had a business, and he got very wealthy. He had a big house and many cars, but he remembered how he promised to Prabhupada, he was a Prabhupada disciple, he promised to Prabhupada, I will always preach your message my whole life. But then he noticed that he has no time actually, because his business was so successful. But one day he went to Krishna, the temple, and he said to Krishna, Krishna, I promise to Prabhupada that I always will preach his message, but my business is so successful, I don't know how I can fulfill this promise to Prabhupada. And somehow he understands from Krishna, this is no big deal. And then he went home, and suddenly he got worried because he got to lose everything. Everything went down, and he thought, I do like before, but what's happening now? And then again he went to Krishna, and he said to Krishna, I came to you to tell you I want to fulfill my promise to Prabhupada. But now I'm losing everything, and actually I did not tell you when. I did not tell you when this should happen. So Krishna was fulfilling immediately his desire to preach. And I also have a question. If I desire that Krishna, I want you to be the center in my life, but here is the false ego who also always want to defend his position. He does not want to give up. It's so stubborn. Yeah. So can I pray to Krishna, please remove my false ego, that you can be in the center, or is this a material desire?
Thank you very much for your first story also. Just reminds me, like Krishna says, ye tamam prapatinte, so to the extent which we allow Krishna to intervene with our lives, to that extent Krishna will also deal with, like, change our lives. So if we are ready to Krishna, let him go 100% deal with our lives, he will just turn it around 180 degrees. And so thank you very much for the story. And I think which you said, if we can ask Krishna, our false ego, to go away, I would say that is spiritual desires. I think when we ask Krishna, can I become your servant, this is, I think, equivalent to asking, can you remove my false ego? Because when our false ego is removed, then the true ego comes, which is, I am a servant of Krishna. And I think in this sense, I would say this is a bona fide spiritual desire. Would you agree?
I'm asking since long time this question. But still, this false ego stands in the way to realize the pure soul.
It's interesting that false ego, like if you look at the coverings of the material world, this is the last layer, is the ego of the universal shell. The last layer is the ego, and outside it's the spiritual world. So with our ego, like our ego defines whether we are in spiritual life or in material life. It's the center, like the border between spiritual and material. So that would be, I think, the last obstacle that we can have in our spiritual journey, is to at the end master our false ego. So I think when we have achieved that, then we can say, now I am fully Krishna conscious.
I heard once a definition of the false ego. It's like a piece of cloth with many lines, colored lines, and this it compares the false ego, that it's all our desires are these lines, and these colored lines are all our anarthas, and it's practically not possible to get it out completely. It's so strong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that is also because that's the core covering at the end. Like we can understand we are not this body, and if we compare to the universal shell, this is like understanding we are not the 5 elements, like the gross elements. But then to understand that we are not the body is already difficult, and then we have to understand we are not the mind, not the intelligence, and then finally that we are not the ego. So, and I think at the end it's in Krishna's hand, so that all our anarthas, they can be removed, and all the desires which we have, they can be turned into some spiritual desires to serve Krishna. So this is what I would say. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for the lecture. I will put the question like this. Every God believer looks for evidences that God interferes in his life or her life. So now I'm thinking, if anybody, any devotee from other religions, if he will look or she will look in the life as a movie, like his or she's life as a movie, we will be able to see how the life was somehow directed by the Lord, how it was written, like screenplay by the Lord. Of course, there is our karma. Now I'm thinking, sometimes we are maybe imagining, we want to have evidences that God is interfering in our lives, and sometimes we are imagining because, like, child wants always to be protected by their parents. It's some kind, I also read, can be childish faith that we always think God is for us everywhere. I was listening what was written. The chatters are saying they're almost is promising the Lord is in heart and He's interfering, and also this verse, but I'm so much obsessed about this, how much I could see really Lord into my life. So can you say something about that?
So how we can see the hand of Krishna in our lives? No?
You said that he is calculating very, how you said, very, not properly, you used one word I cannot remember, very nicely he's calculating how he will deal with our desires, and that's why maybe we cannot see, because he's omnipotent and we are like sometimes like the frog in the well.
Mm-hmm.
So how we could perceive that Lord is interfering in our life?
As
From your experience.
So in the beginning I said Krishna speaks of 5 doers in the Bhagavad Gita also, right? At the end that an activity can be executed, these 5 factors have to play, and only thing we can do is really desiring. Everything else that I can now speak and move is all through because Krishna and the demigods are allow me to move my hand, everything. But only which is really in my hand is the desire, is desiring. So I would say when we want to look at our life and see if we are letting Krishna intervene with our lives or not, I think when we look at our desires and analyze them over the period of time, I think that is probably one factor which we can say, I see now Krishna intervening, or Krishna, I am seeing that I have allowed Krishna to intervene with my life. So looking at your qualities of your desires, this is the thing I would say. Because all the other things, you can say, this is destiny, you never know what can happen, like the business go down, you can say, okay, this is circumstances, how can you say this Krishna has intervened or so? But probably the only thing we can really analyze is the desires which we have. And if we look in our lives, I think, yes, we have many mature desires, but if you look, we also see somehow we have let little space for Krishna to intervene, which is why we have also maybe possibly developed some good desires. And then Krishna, the more we let him, the more he interacts. Does this answer something? Yeah, I mean, modern science, they will say everything is predestined. Yeah. All your thoughts, your desires, they are just products of the neural activity in your head. Whatever you want to wish, they would say this is already the chemical reactions, etc. But from the understanding of Krishna consciousness, no, it starts with the soul's desires at the end. Okay. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.
Glorification.
Hast du gestern auch geschrieben?
Zum ersten Mal.
Ja, aber gestern habe ich das geschrieben.
Ja, das war.
Nein, ich nicht.
Ich glaube vor Maharaj.
Ja. Somebody was lazy.
Das Wichtigste ist einfach, das ist der beste Schuss.
Eben der Sprache.
Danke dir. Sehr schön erlebt.
Krishna favors, we lose everything. The family members are about him. You know from like the number of the verse.
10th canto, chapter 88.
Okay.
But I don't know the number. But it's
88.
yeah, chapter
1088. It's not Tatenum Kampan. This is something that's it's also from 88 chapter, I think.
But it's
Tatenum Kampan, like somebody who is in all circumstances pay obeisances to the Lord. His right is like rightful claim that he is liberated, something like that. Tatenum Kampan. So I will try to search. So 1088.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.